James Gunn, man. He did it again and again and again with this movie. I mean, how does he keep getting away with this in the best way possible? This is one of the best superhero movies of the past decade, so let's talk about it. What's going on, Guardians of the Galaxy? James here with another real review, and today I'm so excited to get into all of my spoiler-free thoughts on Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3, the final film in this trilogy. A huge thank you to Disney and Marvel Studios for giving me the chance to watch this early in IMAX for review. That's right, y'all heard that, IMAX theater. I mean, you guys need to see this in IMAX. Not only was the majority of the film shot in IMAX, but it looks gorgeous on the biggest screen possible and the biggest sound. So I really do recommend seeing it at IMAX, and you can check it out in theaters when it drops on May 5th. And the runtime is, it's the longest Guardians movie. It's 2 hours and 30 minutes. It's a good thing and a bad thing. We'll talk about that in my review. And there's also 2 credit scenes, a mid and a post credit scene. They're not really like amazing, but if you're a fan, you're going to want to stick around. So as a big fan of Volumes 1 and 2, I was excited to dive into Volume 3, which follows our beloved band of misfits settling into life on Nowhere, but it isn't long before their lives are upended by the echoes of Rocket's turbulent past. Peter Quill, still reeling from the loss of Gamora, must rally around his team on a dangerous mission to save Rocket's life, a mission that, if not completed successfully, could possibly lead to the end of the Guardians as we know them. Dun, dun, dun. Y'all know how it goes in trilogies. Usually something crazy is about to happen, and crazy things do happen. But man, oh man, am I satisfied with this film. Now, before we get into all of my thoughts, both positive and negative, if it is your first time here at the channel, welcome to Real James, where I love talking about movies, TV, and all the news in between. So if you do too, hit the big red button below, subscribe to the channel, tap on that bell, and hit the thumbs up button. We are so close to 20,000 subscribers, and it's all because of you. And get loud in the comments, and let me know, guys, which Guardians of the Galaxy film is your favorite? Because I have a funny feeling, for some people, Volume 3 might be their new number 1. Alrighty, y'all. Well, let's get into this film, which is directed and written by James Gunn, of course, and starring Chris Pratt, Zoe Saldana, Dave Bautista, Vin Diesel, Bradley Cooper as our favorite raccoon, Karen Gillan, and Klementieff, with some other notable actors, which we'll talk about in just a little bit. So, without further ado, it's time for the positives, because there's a lot of great takeaways in Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3, and it begins with this. This movie is just such a beautiful and bittersweet send-off for James Gunn in the MCU. He continues to prove why he was honestly the perfect choice to direct and write this trilogy. Volume 3 is packed full of what fans loved from the first 2 films, but it also takes a very mature route. This is the most serious and grounded movie of the 3. There is a great balance of tone, however, with the comedy and the drama and the emotion, so it's not really just serious all the way through, but I will tell you, there are elements and bits of social commentary they play with here in this movie that make it one of the darker MCU movies in recent memory. And I might go as far to say that James Gunn quite possibly takes this movie to the darkest place any MCU film has ever gone, especially with things that happen in the second half of this movie. But speaking of this nice bittersweet theme that's present from the beginning all the way to the end of Volume 3, I genuinely think it was necessary. And I know some people will say, don't make it so cheery, why so many jokes? But they're effective in this movie, because this quite possibly could be the last time we see the Guardians of the Galaxy as they are presently constructed. I mean, even James Gunn has gone to say it's his last Marvel movie, it's his last Guardians movie, it's gonna be the last time we see this band of misfits together. So it needed to balance a lot of tones, and it just really does a good job at paying homage to our Guardians of the Galaxy. There's also a really cool title treatment in the beginning with the Marvel Studios logo, with the fanfare in the background. It's all Guardians of the Galaxy themed, so of course they set the tone right away that, guys, enjoy it while it lasts, because we ain't seen them together like this anymore. And I honestly love the approach to the story itself. It's been a while since I've seen a movie able to balance being completely heartfelt, hilarious, and focusing on multiple characters at a time while still getting across the central message. And if I had to choose one message, it really is about discovering one's self and your purpose. So Rocket Raccoon here is the driving force for this message. He is the main character. This story is all about him. I mean, you could argue that this trilogy is all about Rocket Raccoon, but Volume 3 really puts this character on a pedestal, and it actually shows why this character is just so crucial to the storytelling in Guardians of the Galaxy. He's got the best character arc as well in this movie, with a lot of themes that are explored that could be hard to stomach for some people. There are effective flashbacks here as well that help explain his past and his connection to the High Evolutionary, an evil villain and honestly the most despicable villain since Thanos. Even more despicable than Kang, who is the big bad for the multiverse saga. You could have fooled me. If I didn't know who Kang was, I would have thought this was Kang, because the High Evolutionary is just such an evil villain, but again, we'll talk on that in a little bit. But this film definitely does not stray from also diving into a more depressing mood. I mean, the film opens on Creep by Radiohead, and there are long shots of Rocket walking through nowhere, you know, Guardians of the Galaxy's new HQ. Everyone else is cheery and happy, and he is drowning in his feelings. But we learn, of course, why he's doing that. So it just really goes to show that James Gunn didn't hold back, and it's okay, I think, for this movie to venture into that territory. You know, if you were coming in looking for a completely cheery movie, this ain't it. I mean, you even have Peter Quill in the first half of the film showing us that he's turned to alcohol following Gamora's death. There are heavy themes present here, and honestly, what I'm about to say next might make fans more excited, but for parents that are wondering if this is age appropriate for their children, I do not think this is going to be appropriate for viewers under 13 years old. There's a lot of traumatic imagery on display here, from experimentation on animals, cries of pain and angst and frustration, yelling, shouting, and even an F-bomb that is dropped in this movie. Made me laugh, but some parents probably would think, son, daughter, don't repeat that. But going back to my original point, the movie is balancing out these more serious tones with some beautiful and funny moments, including Drax and Mantis. Speaking of Mantis, she gets much more of a spotlight in this film. And then you have Nebula and even Adam Warlock to help sort of provide those bits of comedic relief, but also an escape from some of the more tension-filled scenes. This is an emotional roller coaster, so when you get into your seat, you better strap in, because for 2.5 hours, your mind is going to be going all over the place with this movie. So I think this is a good as time as ever, I don't even know if I even said that sentence properly, to talk about our great ensemble cast. James Gunn clearly has his favorites in Hollywood to work with that make big and small appearances here, like Jennifer Holland, his wife, who was also in Peacemaker, and then you have Danielle Melchior, and you have Nathan Fillion. So these are just 3 of the many actors in these big and small roles that really help make the movie flow well. And that's because he knows how to write for these actors. I mean, it's just so good at what he does. But there is one actor I'm very glad that he cast and brought over from Peacemaker as well, and that is Chukwudi Iwuji. I mean, this guy is an incredible actor outside of the MCU and the DC universe, but in this film, as the High Evolutionary, he sold me on how sinister and deplorable and despicable he is. As an antagonist, this guy is terrible. But that's what makes him so darn good in this movie. I really think he is more evil than Thanos, like I said before, and I was rooting against him the entire time. So it was an effective display of villainy, and I also thought his acting was aces, even though he legit scared me at times when he would shout at other characters. Seriously, there were some bone-chilling scenes involving Chukwudi Iwuji, and it just worked for me. So this next actor is one that, of course, you can't mention Guardians of the Galaxy without mentioning this actor, and that's Chris Pratt as Peter Quill, or the legendary Star-Lord. He's just, again, showing why he's perfect for this role. His comedic timing is on point. He's able to really nail the emotional beats for this character, and there's one scene in particular that gave me that little feeling, you know, in your throat where you're starting to ball up and you think you might cry. Yeah, there was a moment like that, and it just crushed me. And I really appreciate that James Gunn didn't just give Peter Quill 1 or 2 scenes of him overcoming his past trauma, but instead, this is a character that spent the entire movie trying to work his way out of this past trauma that's been affecting his life. And of course, we're not forgetting about Peter Quill's family on Earth, because to my surprise, they actually touch on this in the film, and That's really, really cool, and I thought that was a really nice conversation between Mantis and Peter in this film. And speaking of Mantis, Klementieff just does an amazing job in this film, and I love her chemistry with Dave Bautista as Drax. They have great comedic timing with one another, but they also provide for some of the most emotional scenes in the film. You'll know it when you see it, but there's a certain sequence in this movie that it got me real good. And while Bradley Cooper is only providing his voice for Rocket in this movie, again, this character's dealing with a lot. There's a lot of emotional baggage, and Bradley Cooper does an amazing job at conveying that in the film. He's not as present, I will say, in this movie compared to volumes 1 and 2, but when Bradley Cooper is there and you can tell that he's hitting on all cylinders, I mean, there's raw emotion that I feel in his voice that just bleeds through the screen. So it really, again, is just incredible, and I love the work he did in the flashback sequences with his new friends, well, technically old friends, in this prison sequence. You'll see it when you see it, but it was just amazing, and I thought that they really utilized Bradley Cooper well in this film, and Rocket as a character. And I don't know if this needs a trigger warning, but there's a lot of shouting in this film, so if you're a very anxious person or maybe have some sort of past trauma with people yelling at one another, buckle up, because there's a lot of that in this movie. But if there are two actors that did this better than the rest, you know, shouting at each other and others, it's Zoe Saldana as Gamora and Karen Gillan as Nebula. I mean, they were so darn good in this movie. Let's begin with Zoe. To me, she does the best job at expressing the nuance of her character. At times, it's a simple squint with her eyes, a head nod, lip quiver, or even just her posturing. These things really add so much to her scenes and to the emotional beats in the movie. She's excellent, and she continues to prove why she's one of the best actors working today. Of course, maybe I'm a little biased, right, because Gamora is my favorite Guardian of the Galaxy, but I thought that she was excellent in this film. Now, I could go more in depth into her character, but I don't want to spoil anything for you guys, so let's move on to her sister Nebula. While Karen Gillan does spend a lot of her time berating others, her performance just continues to build throughout the movie and culminates with one moment that really got me close to crying in the third act. There's a purpose for the shouting, there's a purpose for Nebula feeling like a more hardened character. It's because she's got a lot more on her plate to deal with in Volume 3. But man, oh man, do we get this glimpse into her soul in this movie, and it's just so beautiful to witness. And of course, I'm not forgetting about our boy Groot, who's played by Vin Diesel. Now, Groot does get some really awesome moments here. I do think fans of the character will love a certain standout moment in the final chunk of the film, but to be honest, this feels like the least impactful the character has been in the trilogy. Yeah, Groot is good, but to me, he's not as much of a standout as the aforementioned actors. But outside of the main cast, right, we gotta talk about the supporting actors, because there's a decent amount of screen time that we get with some actors that really make a difference. I loved Maria Bakalova's voice work with Cosmo, this telekinetic dog, who pairs up alongside Sean Gunn's character of Kraglin. They're a great duo together, and even though they don't get the most screen time, when they do, they're going to be stealing a lot of hearts. And then there's Will Poulter as Adam Warlock. Now, his power display is really cool, and there are some awesome moments, and you can tell Will Poulter, being the great actor that he is, does deliver in the scenes he's involved with, but we will talk more about the characterization of Adam Warlock in the negatives section. So, another trio I want to mention before we move on to the next section, in terms of our supporting cast, well, it's Teefs, we got Floor, and Lila. Now, those names might be unfamiliar to you, but they are Rocket's friends when he was first experimented on by the High Evolutionary. Linda Cardellini plays Lila, Michaela Hoover voices Floor, and Asim Charudi voices Teefs. I'm sorry if I mispronounce any of those names, but I will say the standout among those three really is Linda Cardellini, and she's just a great actor anyway, but Lila and Rocket, man. Lila and Rocket together? It's a lot. Alrighty, y'all, so now let's move on to everything outside of the acting and even the directing. I want to talk about the filmmaking in Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3, because from this standpoint, it is the most visually appealing movie of the trilogy, and arguably one of the most visually excellent films in the MCU. I mean, there's so much to play with here. Yes, the CGI is excellent here, especially with the raccoons in the first opening scene of the film. I mean, guys, down to the very hair follicle of these animals. It's incredible. I loved how each world looked from space, like Orgocorp, and I also like to see Counter Earth. It was incredible. So the CGI work is awesome, but me as a fan of cinematography, I love the infighting cinematography and camera work. I was able to track all of the action here, and honestly, Henry Badham, who actually is the DP here and was the DP on Volume 2, I think he just outdid himself. There are some clever angles here, and I especially loved one action sequence in a hallway. That's all I'll say about that, but let me tell y'all, the Guardians of the Galaxy kick so much butt in this sequence, and it looks incredible. I just want to relive that experience again and again. I mean, seeing it on the big screen was a plus, but I feel like on any screen you see that scene, it's just going to grab your attention. My favorite sequences really were that hallway shootout scene and the sequence in Orgocorp. That was so cool. But the movie overall is just very, very immersive. And what adds to that immersion is the makeup work in this film. Seriously, makeup and prosthetics department, y'all crushed it. I could not believe my eyes in some scenes. I mean, to me, I thought, is this CGI? Oh, that's real. Oh my gosh, that's makeup? So on Counter Earth, that is where you get the best display of makeup work here. It should be up for awards. It is incredible to see. And again, it just adds to that experience. You really feel engrossed into the film when you see that work on full display. And when it comes to the soundtrack, y'all know I'm not forgetting about the awesome mix Volume 3. Come on now. Volumes 1 and 2 had some amazing soundtrack choices, and the needle drops were executed perfectly. And I can confidently say that trend continues in Volume 3. While I feel it might be like the weakest volume of any of the other awesome mixes, it's still very strong. I mean, there were some really great needle drops here, especially a Beastie Boys song that just got me in the mood, bro. I was ready to run through a wall. I did not do that because I am not Drax or Groot. And I especially loved that Volume 3 wasn't afraid to infuse some more downtrodden tracks to match the story that was unfolding. This again is another masterclass on how to effectively use songs in movies, so hopefully the sequel to the Super Mario Bros. Movie takes some notes. Alrighty, y'all. So now let's get into the negatives, because while this is a near perfect MCU film, it's not perfect. There are two things I want to highlight here, and the very first thing is one that we talked about a little bit earlier in this review, and that's Adam Warlock. Listen, Will Poulter's acting is great. I have no negative notes for his acting. It's just the way that this character was incorporated in the overall story for Volume 3. I do not think that the film handles Adam Warlock as a character very well. I think the movie feels a little bit bloated whenever it tries to focus on Adam Warlock. And that's not a great feeling. It almost feels overstuffed to a degree, where I got a similar feeling in Wakanda Forever with Riri Williams, where I liked the character, it just felt like the character was shoehorned in. That's exactly how Adam Warlock feels in this movie. It's not that the character's story needed to be fleshed out completely, because again, he's not the main character in this film. He's very much a supporting character. However, the movie tends to try to include Adam Warlock in plenty of scenes to get the audience excited about the character, and while I do actually love his power display, I'm not exactly in love with the way that they've written the character in this film. There's potential here for Adam Warlock, but it's not fully realized in Volume 3, and while I'm confident that we will see more of Adam Warlock in future movies and MCU TV shows on Disney+, I'm not necessarily sure where this character fits into the MCU, and that's not a good thing to be concerned about coming out of this film. Now, the second negative, and my last negative note for this movie, is the film's length. 2.5 hours, man. I don't mind a movie being 2.5 hours, but if I feel the length, that's a problem. And I felt that at the 1.5-hour marker. I looked down on my watch, and while I thought the pacing was generally pretty good in Volume 3, it was at the middle point of this movie, right in the smack dab middle of the film, that I thought, man, this length is waning on me. There were some jokes in the second act that really didn't work well. They went long with some scenes that I felt like they could have gone shorter with, and there are just some decisions to linger where I thought, we could have probably saved this for another scene down the line. So I was a bit distracted by the runtime in the middle of the film, thinking, wow, we have another hour left. man. But at the same time, I wasn't upset because that feeling fleeted once the third act started. I'm sure there will be a divided audience on the third act and whether it works or not, but for me, the third act was perfectly executed. Okay, one more negative. I'm not the biggest fan of something that we do see at the end of this movie, the very end of the film, but I can't comment on that until the movie releases. So you're not getting that spoiler out of me until May 5th, y'all. But yeah, there's just something that happens and I'm thinking, MCU's doing an MCU thing. But hey, maybe with time it grows on me. So now let's get right into my final thoughts, you guys, on Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3. This is a great movie and again, a near perfect MCU film. It's one of my favorite superhero movies of the last 10 years, and it's been a long time since I've come out of an MCU film feeling this satisfied. The last time I was this happy about the MCU was when I left the theater for No Way Home. So yes, while that doesn't seem like a very long time ago, we've had a lot of projects in Phase 4 and 5 so far that I'm starting to almost think, am I getting fatigued? But Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3 wiped away any of that concern. I came out of this film feeling fresh, rejuvenated as an MCU fan, and I thought to myself, this is why I love this franchise. And the reason why Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3 works so well in this regard is because it feels less of a stepping stone to a future project and more of a slice of life adventure. And that's why Guardians of the Galaxy is one of the strongest trilogies in the MCU. It's because it doesn't rely on the other films as much as some of our other properties in this universe. So instead of going in thinking, I had to go watch the other 100 movies to really understand this, well, let me try. No, you can sit down having watched volumes 1, 2, and of course Infinity War and Endgame, and come into this knowing, you know what? I'm caught up. There's a lot to love in this movie, from the direction, the writing, and even the acting. It all culminates to a beautifully heartfelt experience. I keep going back to that word heartfelt because even though it's a dark movie, it's got dark undertones, you guys. There's some serious moments, and there are a lot of things that I wish I could discuss, but I can't without spoiling anything. However, I will say there's a lot of social commentary as well. By the end, I came away smiling and feeling so hopeful, happy, and, you know, I'm not afraid to say that Volume 3 is in an elite tier in the MCU. So, yes, I love this movie, and if you guessed on my poll that I was going to rate this 4.5 out of 5, well, you guessed correctly, because it's a 4.5 out of 5 with room to get to a 5 out of 5. I just think that a couple of those negatives hold the film back from being a 5 out of 5. But man, Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3 is a masterclass in how to end a trilogy properly. So there you have it, you guys. That's my real review of Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3. I hope you loved this review, and when you see the movie, hey, let me know what you think about it down below in the comments. Do you love it as much as me? Are you in the middle, or do you really hate this film? Don't worry. I'll talk with everyone about this film, even if you hated it. But you might be wrong. I'm just kidding. And hey, if you're at this point, go ahead and hit the big red button below, subscribe to the channel, tap on that bell, and hit the thumbs up button for more reviews, reactions, and videos just like this, because guys, we're getting so much closer to June. And in June, there's gonna be a lot of movies to cover, so I'm gonna need you guys' support. Alrighty, y'all, again, thanks so much for watching, and I'll catch you at the next screening. Maybe I do like raccoons now. I don't know. I guess they're kind of cute.